What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG deck profile. Now, this is a deck that I really enjoy, and I've been playing a lot in Master Duel because of the Fusion Synchro, event, and I wanted to see what it would look like in TCG as of right now, especially given the new improvements to the format. So here is Predaplant. I know the little title says Pure Predaplant, and you obviously see cards on the list that aren't Pure Predaplant. However, I think this is the only really viable way that you can run Predaplant in like a basic sense. It's just that Branded Fusion is such a powerful card for the archetype that it would just make sense to include, like, it doesn't hurt that bad including the 8 cards needed to play the Branded engine in the main board. It's not too bad at all. It's like including Fiendsmith in your list. But this deck is incredibly powerful, and it has a pretty damn decent matchup against decks like Ryzeal, cards like Predaplanting, and how the Predator counters just function in general. Sometimes just straight up turn off their strategy. So I'm going to be discussing that, and I'm going to be walking through the card by card, and afterwards I'm going to be going into a live duel. I'm going to be, while recording, I'm going to immediately jump into a game, and we're going to play a game, and we're win or lose, I'm going to show you how the deck plays. So that's enough yapping. Let's get into the deck profile. Starting off, we're on triple copies of Predaplant Orpheus Scorpio. On normal or special, we can send a card from our hand to the graveyard to special summon a Predaplant from our deck, except for itself. Incredibly important, it can grab our next card or grab the card after our next card, which is very critical. Speaking of our next card being Predaplant Darlingtonia Cobra. This card, I hate it. I hate this card so much. I always open it. I play one, and I'm always opening it no matter what. And if you open it, it does jack shit fucking nothing. It's really unfortunate. This card reads, if it's special summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, you can add one polymerization spell or a spell card or fusion spell card from your deck to your hand, and you can use that effect of Darlingtonia Cobra once per duel. It has a pretty heavy restriction on it and a pretty weird way of activating it. It triggers if you summon it off of Scorpio or one other card that we'll get to in a moment, and those are the only ways to trigger this card. So, what are our targets for our Darlingtonia Cobra? I'm going to talk about it a little bit before we talk about the rest of the Predaplants. So we are able to grab Super Polymerization, we're able to grab Instant Fusion, we're able to grab Branded Fusion, and that's about it for the cards that we're actually playing in this list. Other really good cards you can grab are Polymerization, Fusion Substitute, or one of the better ones, if you wanted to play more of a pure variant and ditch the branded stuff, I would highly recommend running a card of the name Ultra Polymerization, which allows you to get extra materials on your board for 2,000 life points functionally. So those are the different polys that we are playing. The only reason we aren't playing more is because we are playing the branded engine, which has polys in archetype, so it's not the worst thing in the world. And so that is basically the rundown with Darlingtonia Cobra. You don't want to see it in your hand, it has to be in your deck though. We're also on the card after the next card, being Predaplant Chlamydia Sundew. Monsters with Predator counters that you use as fusion material are treated as dark. That effect is only applicable while this card specifically is on the field, which is important when you're using your opponent's monsters as materials for your fusion summons. And during the main phase ignition effect, you can fusion summon one dark fusion monster from your extra deck using this card on the field and monsters from hand, field, and or monsters with a predator counter your opponent controls as fusion materials, and that is a hard once per turn. Some lists you might see running 1 or 3 of this card. I'm choosing to pick that middle ground being 2. I want to see it some of the times, not all of the time, and it's a card that's incredibly searchable out of our main deck, so I'm just running 2 for the repeatability of it. If you want to do a turn 1, and then sent to the graveyard, you can do it again for turn 2 by getting one out of your deck with something like Orpheus Scorpio. But a card that we are always going to be running 3 of is going to be triple copies of Predaplant Byslip. If it's sent to the graveyard, add a Predaplant monster from your deck to your hand, except for Predaplant Byslip. If a monster with a Predator counter is on the field, we can bring it back from the graveyard, but banish it and it leaves the field. Incredibly powerful card. Amazing discard for Orpheus Scorpio, amazing discard for a card like Branded Opening. You always want this card going to the graveyard every single turn. It's a free body if you have a Predator counter on the field. It doesn't have to be on your opponent's monsters. It can be on your own monsters and you can bring it back. Card's nuts. Like, you gotta be playing 3 of this card in my opinion, no matter what. But that's it for our non-Pendulum Predaplants. Now let's talk about our Pendulum Predaplants. We're on 2 copies of Predaplant Triantis. While in scale, if you fusion summon a Dark Fusion monster, you can also use cards in your pen zones as material. If this card is sent to the graveyard, add to your extra deck face up because it was used as fusion material. You can choose a monster on the field. You can choose monsters on the field up to the number of monsters you control and place one predator counter on each of them. And if you do, any of those monsters that are level 2 or higher become level 1 as long as they have a predator counter. That's how the predator counters function. Anything with a predator counter on it will become a level 1. That's just how it works, which is why it hoses Ryzeal. What rank 1 XCs are Ryzeal gonna be making? They can make little Terragon? Like, I don't think so. They can make maybe Fucko, but that's about it. And we're also going to be on triple copies of Predaplant Bufolicula. Now, this card in scale is just a poly, and then if it's sent to the graveyard or add to our extra deck face up because it was used as a fusion material, you can add one face up dark. You can add a face up dark pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, except for itself. So the idea is you scale Bufo, you scale Triantis. You use Bufo to fusion summon using itself in Triantis because of Triantis' scale effect allowing it to use itself. And then the monster that you summon is going to activate this effect Chainlink 1. We're going to go Bufo Chainlink 2 to add back Triantis to our hand. And then Chainlink 3 Triantis is able to put a Predator counter non-targeting on anything it wants on board. So very interesting combo there. Bufo does have to be at 3 in my opinion. Poly on legs or on scale, I guess, is very important and for this strategy, so we do want to be seeing this as frequently as possible. And also, I just want to let you know, full combo is Bufo plus Triantis, so that does everything the deck wants to do. So just putting that out there. And then for our other Predaplant spells and traps, we're on triple copies of Practice, special summoning a Predaplant monster from our hand, then adding a Predap card from our deck to our hand, except for Practice, and then we're locked into fusions for the rest of the turn. Powerful card, it can add back, it can special Predaplant, it's an extender. Main downside, you have to be able to special summon that Predaplant in order to add a card, so if this card is by itself in your hand, you have no Predaplants, it does nothing. Which is why we are trying to put as many Predaplants in our deck as we possibly can in order to make sure this card is live. And one of the cards, the main reason this deck kind of hoses Ryzeal, if it is allowed to go first, of course, is this card right here, Predaplanting. Send one Predaplant monster from your deck to the graveyard. That is cost. Place one Predator counter on each face-up monster on the field. If you do, any of those monsters that are level 2 or higher become level 1 as long as they have a Predator counter. If you fusion summon a dark monster while this card is in your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can banish this card from your graveyard, pop a card on field. You can use each effective Predaplanting once per turn. Card is incredible. It's the main card you want to be searching when you're going turn 1 to end off your board. It's when you're on the clapback and this card's in your graveyard and you're trying to kill your opponent. This is also going to help you. This is going to help clear their board. It's incredible. It's insane. It also sends a card from your deck to the graveyard for cost. So you're always going to be sending buy slip and then getting a search unless they want to negate the free send. I mean, then sure, like whatever. And this card is just incredible. It's a Predap card, so we can add it off Practice. You're going to see what other card we can add it off of later. I just think it's really great, and I'm playing it at 1 in the main list. And you can see a couple extra copies of it in the side. If we are going first, we do want to be opening it if possible. And then, of course, we're on the Super Poly I mentioned earlier. 1 copy of Instant Fusion, because this is also a way to get our full combo going. 1 copy of Foolish Burial in order to send our buy slip to the graveyard. We can also send another very cute card that we'll get to when we talk about Branded. And let's talk about our non-engine before we talk about Branded. For non-engine, we're on triple Thrust, 1 Talents, 1 Called By, and then for hand traps, we're on triple Impulse, triple Ash Blossom. This isn't really a budget deck if you did want to play Impulse. If you wanted to cut the Impulse, it does become significantly more budget, of course, other than the cards in the side, being Truistorm specifically. This deck is all darks, though. You're only really ever activating Dark Monsters effects. You rarely make Lubellion, if at all, so this is just here just in case. Everything else, like almost literally everything else, plays underneath a Dominus Impulse, so why not play Ash and then Ash Blossom too? Like, you know? But let's talk about our Branded engine. We're on triple copies of Opening, 1 copy of Luber in order to search the Branded Fusion if we didn't want to get to Branded Fusion via our Predaplants, 1 copy of the titular Branded Fusion, and then 1 copy of Fallen of Albaz for our Fallen of Albaz target, and 1 copy of our Stay Sailor Romarine for our light target. Now, what does this card do? It has 2 effects on it, only 1 relevant effect. First effect, we can just ignore it. Second effect, if this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can send 1 level 5 or lower plant monster from your deck to the graveyard, and that's it. And you can also send it from your extra deck to the graveyard, but the main reason is for the main deck, because we can just send a buy slip from our deck to the graveyard in order to get a search. Look at that, yippee! We get a search, which is critical. It is part of our combo with Bufo and Triantis, so we do need to be playing Romarine. It's also a light monster in our main deck that we can use in order to make Albion the Branded Dragon by sending it to the graveyard with Branded Fusion. You could also play, of course, Nibiru for that if you'd like, but since we are playing Impulse, it's a lot easier to be sending our Stay Sailor than Nibiru, since once we activate the Stay Sailor, we're free to activate our Impulse whenever we want, and it's part of our baseline combo. We're also on one copy of Branded Banishment as our branded spell and trap of choice for our Albion to be sending from our deck to our field, because in our combo, we do make sure we send an Albion from our field to the graveyard, so we can get that beautiful, beautiful graveyard effect. But that's it for our main deck, a nice solid 40 cards. Now let's talk about our extra deck. In our extra deck for our branded cards, I'm just going to quickly go over these because you all know what branded cards do. I know what branded cards do. I'll just mention the last one a little bit more in detail. We're in 2 copies of Albion the Branded Dragon, 1 copy of Mirror Jade the Iceblade Dragon. We're on 2 Albion because we can send 1 Albion off of Mirror Jade, 1 copy of Lubellion in order to be able to put those cards back into our deck, 1 copy of Alba Letnus the Abyss Dragon. This is a very cute card that we're playing for our Mirror Jade send. We're not expecting people to be playing dragons, so we're not planning on super pulling this guy out. This card just has a really relevant graveyard effect for us. If this card's in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add 1 Polymerization normal spell card or 1 Fusion normal spell from your deck to your hand. This is going to allow us to add instant fusion from our deck to our hand, which is incredibly important because in theory, if we have gotten to Branded Fusion in our turn, the card that we have not gotten to is Instant Fusion, so we're able to add that next turn. So, not the worst thing in the world. That's our branded cards. For our Super Poly targets, we're on 1 Garura, 1 Mud Dragon, and then for our Predaplant / Super Poly target is 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. This card is actually not too bad. I didn't like this card all too much at first when I was first playing the Predaplant strategy. I thought it was like, oh my god, this is where this Super Poly target belongs to. But this card's actually not bad at all. It can copy effects, it can gain attack, which can help you OTK, and if your opponent ever removes this card, it's Mirror Jade, just immediately. So yeah, we're also on Predaplants of double Ambula Melodies on Fusion Summon, adding a Predaplant monster or Predap spell or trap from our deck or graveyard, or face up extra deck to our hand. And then we can, on Ignition Effect, target a monster our opponent controls with a Predator counter, or a monster that we control, tribute it, and special summon a Predaplant from our deck. This is the other card that is able to trigger our Darlingtonia Cobra, because it is a Predaplant monster effect that's summoning a Predaplant. This card's incredibly important for our game plan. It gets whatever Predaplant that we need from our deck face up on our side of the field, and it can grab any Predap card or any Predaplant card that we need from our main deck to our hand, being either Predapractice, Predaplanting, or any Predaplant whatsoever. We're also on 1 copy of Predaplant Chimeraflesia. This card needs a Predaplant monster and a Dark monster. Once per turn, you can target 1 monster in the field at level less than or equal to this monster with this card's. Banish it when an attack is declared involving this card in an opponent's face-up monster. You can activate this effect. Until the end of that turn, that opponent's monster loses 1,000 attack, and if it does, this card gains 1,000 attack. So basically, this card's always winning combat. Once per turn, during the next standby phase after this card is sent to the graveyard, add 1 Polymerization spell or fusion spell from your deck to your hand. This card can also grab Super Polymerization, by the way. It's an interesting card. Most Predaplant players are not playing it. I am, just because I like the Ignition Effect removal. I think it's very interesting, especially since it does banish the monster instead of destroying it, which is relevant for a lot of decks. So I am opting to include it in my list, also because I am playing Super Polymerization. We're on double copies of Predaplant Dragus Depelia. This is one of the main reasons to be playing this deck. I'm gonna be for real. It needs a fusion monster and a dark monster. Once per turn, quick effect, target a face-up monster your opponent controls, just put a predator counter on it. And it also has the static effect. Negate the activated effects of your opponent's monsters that have predator counters. Yeah. So it's a skill drain. Not really, actually. It's not really a skill drain. You need to go through the effort to put predator counters on your opponent's monsters. But what if there was a card that put a predator counter on everything? So not only has this turned into a level modulation and 1 point of interaction being a negation, if we have a Predaplanting on our side of the board as well, we can negate their entire board and level modulate their entire board. Of course, there's a high probability that they are able to clear the Dragus Depelia, but as long as they're winning and they have a field full of monsters with predator counters on them, we can just eat them all up. It ain't no issue. So we're on 2 copies of Dragus Depelia just to ensure that we're able to consistently do it. There's even some setups that we can do where we're setting up multiple Dragus Depelias. We're on 1 copy of Trifovertum. This one's a little bit hard to pronounce, if I'd be for real. It needs 3 dark monsters on the field. Gains attack equal to the total original attack of all monsters on the field with predator counters. This is another way we can OTK. This card very regularly gets above 10k. And then when your opponent special summons a monster from their extra deck while you control this fusion summon monster, quick effect negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster. And if there's a monster with a predator counter on this monster with a predator counter on the field while this card's in the graveyard, you can special summon it from the graveyard in defense position. Keep in mind, if you do special summon it that way, you are not able to negate the summon of any monsters because you can only negate it if it was properly fusion summoned. So it's just a big guy on board now. But it's also a fusion monster that's on board that you can use in order to make another Dragus Depelia. So there's always that. And then lastly, 1 copy of the big boss monster that we're probably never really going to be making, Starving Venom Predapower Fusion Dragon. It is a mouthful. It's a dark fusion monster and a fusion monster, which makes it very difficult to be making for this deck because you're going to be having to give up 2 high value cards, being like Dragus Depelia plus like Ambulo, or maybe like the most ideal situation would honestly be Mud Dragon of the Swamp plus like Albion. That'd be like the most ideal situation. Or maybe like a Garuda plus Albion. But there's ways you can make it, which is why we're including it in the deck. It's always a predaplant card. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated, quick effect, tribute a monster on the field with a predator counter, and if you do negate the activation, if this fusion summoning card you control is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, you can target a dark monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and you can only use that second effect of Predapower Fusion Dragon once per turn. So that means if this card is on our side of the field, we negate a card your opponent controls, they remove it from our side of the board. When we use its effect to bring it back from the graveyard, because they can summon any dark monster in the graveyard, including itself, we can then negate again. It's not a hard once per turn. We can use the negate a second time, which is the idea behind this card. So this card is very powerful when it actually does come up, and it will end the game like on the spot. But that's it for our main deck. Let's cover our side just because we are going to be playing a game, so it is a little bit relevant. We're on triple Nibiru, double Predaplanting. If we're going first, I'm putting these in. Artifact Lancia for Malice. Bestials for Fiendsmith, Super Poly if we are going second, and 1 copy of Predaplant Hydra. This card is like the best kaiju in the entire world for this archetype. You can special summon this card from your hand or the graveyard by tributing a monster on either player's side of the field with a predator counter. You can only summon it once per turn that way, but also while it's in your graveyard, you can banish a Predaplant monster from your graveyard, target a face-up monster on the field, it loses 500 attack permanently, and that is a once per turn. This card is actually surprisingly like alright. Like, it doesn't seem like good at all when you first read it, but during gameplay, against cards like Called by the Grave and like targeted banishes like Bestials, this card is really able to screw up your opponent big time if they underestimate the power of just banishing a Predaplant for basically no effect from your graveyard. It can really screw up your opponent's plays, so I really like it, just siding it just in case. It's also a kaiju. It's just a kaiju, you know? But that's going to be at the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, if you still are. If you are a member, thank you, Ari. If you want to become a member, I'd recommend staying tuned to the end of the video. But again, that's going to be all. Thank you all so much for watching, if you still are, and I'll be seeing you all later. Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh! Players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh! And the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or 2 before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.